Hello and welcome to the Sunday History Rewind here in the French Riviera. I'm your host, Jim Lumley. Today, hanging out in Nice, France. You know, about a dozen U.S. presidents have visited the country of France. The first was Woodrow Wilson in December of 1918 during the wrap-up of World War I. And today we're going to talk about that in a video displaying Woodrow Wilson's historic visit here to France on the Sunday History Rewind.
Bon appétit.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
When you hear the name Woodrow Wilson, you might think aloof, intellectual, the professor turned president with the pince-nez for glasses. And yes, that's how it's pronounced.
He was the college professor with the pince-nez, so he's easy to bash.
And that's a French word.
And that's a French word, good one.
But in his new biography of the 28th president, A. Scott Berg wants you to know that Wilson was no cold fish.
Woodrow Wilson was an extremely emotional, romantic man. I don't think there's been a more emotionally turbulent presidency than Wilson's.
Mrs. Wilson was giving birth in this room, in that very bed, as a matter of fact.
Born in Stanton, Virginia, the son of a Presbyterian minister, Wilson, from a very early age, imbued everything he did with moral purpose.
It's quite amazing. I mean, here's Woodrow Wilson at 9 years old drafting a constitution for his Little League baseball team. It's got to be the only Little League team to this day with its own constitution.
For college, he ventured north to New Jersey, to what would become Princeton University.
Is it true that when he got to Princeton as an undergraduate, he had never heard the Star-Spangled Banner?
That's true. He had never heard it. He was a Southern boy.
He would return to Princeton as its president, transforming what had become something of a country club into a first-rate university. The political bosses of New Jersey took notice and made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
To run for governor of New Jersey, which at the time is perhaps the most corrupt state in the Union.
I think you can take the perhaps out of. In 1910, the very corrupt Democratic machine of very corrupt New Jersey says, who is the squeaky cleanest man in all of New Jersey we could run as our puppet?
But Wilson would be nobody's puppet.
He does get elected, and the first thing he does is kick out the machine. And now everybody in the country is saying, who is this?
Within 2 years, he was elected to the White House. Turned out our only president with a PhD knew how to connect with the masses.
He never spoke down. He always raised the audience to his level. This had a magical effect, especially on the uneducated, because they felt better about themselves for having heard him and understood him.
We want to establish a real partnership between all the people and the federal government.
Wilson didn't just go to the people. He went to Capitol Hill, becoming the first president in 110 years to address Congress in person. He would do so 25 times in his first term alone. His progressive agenda sailed through. The establishment of the Federal Reserve, the 8-hour workday, workman's comp. But on one issue, he was decidedly unprogressive.
Under his watch, the District of Columbia and the federal government were segregated racially. It was a big backward step.
Woodrow Wilson didn't invent segregation, but he certainly institutionalized it in the government offices in Washington, D.C., which in effect sanctioned segregation throughout the country.
By 1914, the world was at war. The U.S. remained neutral at first. Meanwhile, Wilson's own world was crumbling. His wife, Ellen, lay dying.
There's a moment where he's literally writing a letter to the heads of state in Europe saying, must you really proceed with war? He's writing that with one hand and holding his dying wife's hand with the other.
But only months after her death, Wilson would fall madly in love with Edith Bowling.
She was the first woman with a driver's license in the District of Columbia.
She had wheels.
She had wheels, yeah.
Wilson lobbied hard for her.
Who has time to write 3 love letters a day while the world is falling apart?
Well, Woodrow Wilson made the time, he would tell you, and that this was more important because he couldn't serve as president unless he had the woman he loved, basically.
Wilson wooed her during long drives. This was his 1919 Pierce Arrow.
This was his car. It was part of the White House fleet.
It's really nice. It's very comfortable.
It is.
Edith became the second Mrs. Wilson.
And she was very buxom.
She was buxom, yes, yes. And don't think Sigmund Freud didn't make a lot of that when he wrote about Wilson and his marriage.
Is that right?
He did.
That he needed kind of like a mothering thing?
Absolutely.
Wilson was reelected as the man who kept us out of war. But within weeks of his second inauguration, he would declare, the world must be made safe for democracy.
And it's an about-face.
It is an about-face, and it is the underpinnings of our foreign policy to this day.
America sent 2 million doughboys to Europe and defeated the Germans. In Paris, Wilson was welcomed as the savior of the world.
It was bigger than anything Napoleon saw, Caesar saw. Now, does all that adulation somehow affect you? I think he still remained the preacher's son with a Christ complex.
Wilson would spend 6 months in Paris. His mission? To establish a League of Nations to prevent all future wars.
If we had some kind of international parliament where every nation could sit, this could ostensibly stop all war.
The League is the vital and compelling part of the treaty.
The U.S. Senate balked, so in 1919, Wilson took his case to the people, a grueling 29-city tour. But outside Pueblo, Colorado, he collapsed. Days later, he suffered a stroke and took to his bed, the left side of his body paralyzed. Edith took control. How much control is still debated.
Was Edith Wilson the first female president of the United States? She would be the first to tell you she made no decisions he would not have made. That being said, nothing got to the president without passing through Edith's hands first.
But not even Edith could convince Wilson to compromise on even minor details concerning the League. The Senate would vote down Wilson's peace plan. The U.S. would not enter the League, dooming it.
Do you think it could have prevented World War II?
Yeah, I'll go on record. I think a League of Nations, Wilson's League of Nations, could have stopped World War II.
A controversial take on a controversial president whose influence is with us today.
We stand in the presence of an awakened nation. Plainly, it is a new age.
The most lasting piece of the Wilson legacy has to be that one line, the world must be made safe for democracy, for good or for bad. That really, though, has become the foundation of our foreign policy. And whenever this country even thinks of intervening in Syria or in Egypt or Iraq or wherever,
It started with Wilson.
It's really that Wilson notion that there is a moral obligation.
Thank you for joining us today for the Sunday History Rewind. I'm Jim Lumley from Nice, France. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.